Welcome to Clear Conversations, Entrepreneurial Legacies with your host, John Sleeting, an executive partner for Clearwater Capital Partners. Join John and his guests on this exclusive journey behind the scenes of extraordinary entrepreneurial families. In this series, we will dive deep into the stories of John's guests, who generously unveil the paths they've walked, the challenges they've overcome, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Throughout these conversations, we explore their achievements beyond mere recognition, disclosing the distinctive perspectives that have shaped their entrepreneurial journeys. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm your host, John Sleeting, and today I'm joined by Valerie Hogan. Valerie is a wealth advisor in our family office practice of Clearwater Capital Partners. We are thrilled that Val had joined our team earlier this year, and her journey is one that really gives us pause to step back. From her early education regarding medical school and the sciences to moving into being a law school and a licensed attorney, an intellectual property attorney, to working into the philanthropic world on major gift structuring and assisting families to have the impact in the world that they want from a charitable giving perspective and doing it tax efficiently. But then her own stirring of what that meant to her moving into the wealth management space to have even a greater impact. She's lived this in her life, the lived experience with her dad passing at an earlier age, her coming alongside her mother and her family. And as we often say, what we want for our client families is also what we want for our families, and to be able to do the work that we do professionally and also to live that out for our own families. There's no better person to have this conversation than Valerie Hogan. So I'm just excited to share this conversation with all of you, and I look forward to us diving in. Valerie, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and we'll explain to listeners what I mean by a long time and why it's come to be. But I'm so excited for us to go back through your story, share with listeners your journey that you've been on as you've joined Clearwater Capital in this family wealth advisory practice that we have in serving families. So I'm delighted to sit down and have this dialogue with you. As we start, and as I start in every conversation, is entrepreneurial legacies, right? So we'll talk about your journey and what that means in the families that we serve, but legacy and defining legacy. And I'm gonna read back to you your own quote.
Oh boy!
And then I'll let you go from there. The quote that you have tied into your biography on our website: "I love unleashing the potential of purposeful giving, empowering individuals and families and maximizing their philanthropic impact, and helping them live a legacy that embodies the values they aspire for." So Val, and formally it's Valerie, right? If I could be so informal as calling you Val as
Definitely.
we have this conversation. Val, welcome. Thank you for being here on this podcast episode, and explain to the listeners, what do you mean by legacy?
Wow, so many things, right? That word is so encompassing. I certainly have lived through one. I mean, I had incredible parents, incredible grandparents, incredible churches, communities that influenced me through my life. And we have children, and now I have a grandchild and one on the way. So you start to think more even holistically there. I think through that to me, it's not only what are we going to leave behind, but what are we doing right now? What impact are we having? Who had impact on us? And what are we going to take and build on with that? What are we building? And then who are we becoming in the process? And then who's watching that? And who are they becoming? What can others become because of what we do? So that's pretty packed in there. But
and so before we talk about like what you hope for, right, in your own legacy and your own work and what you're doing today, when you think about, you mentioned, parents, grandparents, what do you believe that the legacy is that has shaped you to be the person that you are?
So much there too. It's like, how long do we have, right? So I had the benefit of being the daughter of a John Maxwell level 5 leader. I think that's very rare. And he was in ministry for many, many years hugely impactful, even globally. So I realized that that's kind of a rarity, but for me, that's quite an inheritance. And it's the thinking is, now what do I do with that? How do you build on that? And in some cases, that can be really intimidating. And that's just my dad's side. Those that know my mom know she's quite a force too, right? She's been in ministry for 18 years as a widow, had a career as a counselor. She's an amazing woman. And that list goes on further and further back through the generations. So that really built on who I became, who I'm becoming, and set a pretty high standard for where I'd like to go and how I give to others as well.
Well, so you use the word inheritance. And when most people think about inheritance, especially in the wealth management advisory business, right? And families think about, well, the inheritance is the legal documents and it's the assets, the financial components. But inheritance, as you just defined it, is not that. So how do you think about inheritance very broadly?
I do think about it holistically, because if we have any one component without the others, it comes up a little bit shy, right? If we have all the things, but we're lacking spiritually or we're lacking with family, right? We feel that. And so I do think about it holistically. I view myself as an heiress of a great legacy, not necessarily financially, although, I did. If you look at the statistics globally, it's certainly there too, right? But I would view myself as very rich in what I inherited by what I saw growing up, the love I received, the example, the encouragement, the admonishment at times to give to others and to just be better than the day before.
Right. So I think defining what a rich life is is not defining it by the size of the balance sheet. Right. And I think that's just hugely important as we work through how you manage wealth, right? But for the purpose and for the end that is more holistic, as you said. So when you look forward then, and you think about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and the impact that you can have, how do you think about what your own legacy's going to be, or the aspirational aspect of what your legacy is?
I think we can never really know the ripple effect, but we know it's there, right? I've felt the ripple effect of those that have come before me. So what ripple effect am I going to leave behind? And I'm working with families that want to do good. They want to leave lasting impact. They want holistic and togetherness with their family, and they just want to be good and generous to others. And so my thought process, the impact I can have is just to kind of give rocket fuel to that. I can take my education, my knowledge, the wisdom that I've gained over the a few years that I've lived now, and really bring that to bear in helping them achieve that, just helping them bring it to the next level.
So I'm smiling because there's we're going into holiday season as we're recording this. There's a movie that was done by Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds called Spirited. And there's a song in it, if you want to make a ripple. And I encourage anyone, you can go out, find Spirited, go to the end, in the credits when they're running the full length of it. So my children are all cringing right now that I'm bringing this up, right? But it is, if you want to make a ripple, you have to start with small steps. You have to impact one individual at a time, right? So if you want to have a global impact, well, how do you change one person's day? Or a call I had with someone this morning, and they weren't expecting it in the dialogue that we had, but they're like, this was a great call, right? This was impactful in the day. Those moments on a day-to-day basis are significant, and you have to be intentional about creating those, crafting those, and being in tune with then the people you're coming in contact with. So if we rewind a little bit, right? Because then we're going to come into how you ended up here at Clearwater Capital. But if we rewind a little bit, you spoke about your parents, your grandparents. What was your upbringing like? Did you think you'd be doing what you're doing today when you go back and you're like, okay, I was a young girl and here's what life looked like? What did that share a little bit so our listeners get to know you?
So I'm not that different than I was bringing up. I was always pretty serious. I am the oldest sibling, pretty driven. For a good chunk of time, I thought I'd be a surgeon. So helping and service to others was always a key component of that. interesting because both my parents, I mean, my mom was in education, nonprofit, and my dad in ministry. So it's not that ran in the family, but so I took that path for a while, but it was academic, curious, learning, driven. My 3 younger brothers would tell you that I was quite driven, maybe beyond what they were able to tolerate at times. So I had 3 siblings that, we had a lot of fun, made each other nuts at times. So I think that probably added to the humor part. I like to think of myself as academic, but also want to have fun on the journey as well.
And so you started out down a medical path, and undergrad was focused from a scientific view.
Right.
So help listeners understand a little bit of that, your early adult years.
Right. So I would call it a serendipitous journey if I wasn't a person of faith, right? Everything happens for a reason in my core belief system. So I did go through that path, and after undergrad with biology and chemistry undergrad, I took both the LSAT and the MCAT because I wasn't sure, but I knew I wanted to keep going.
Not a combination that most people would probably go with, right?
It wasn't. Most people won't do that for funsies.
Med school or law school. Let's see which one.
One of the two. But I just had this feeling of I wasn't quite done with my academic journey, but I did learn how long a person is in residency and did think I need to take a break and earn some money. So that journey took me back to Chicago. And I ended up working for a food company that got purchased by a larger food company. So my first experience in mergers and acquisitions was my first job. So that was part of it.
And integrations are difficult. So you left that business and then you went to the law school, right? You went down you chose law over medicine.
I did.
Why? Why would you make that path?
At that point, I had left that role and we adopted our son out of foster care. And so at that point, I decided I was home for a little bit and after we had adopted him, and incidentally, we had 3 foster children placed with us and did adopt all 3 of them within 1 year. So I will call that phase of my life the girl interrupted phase. But I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't done academically and I was still curious for more. So that led me to law school. And I was able to do that while they were growing up.
Right. And so in full disclosure for everyone, you are a licensed attorney.
I am.
You are a intellectual property patent attorney, registered, if I understand, the state of California. You're not practicing law within Clearwater Capital and the engagement with client families.
Right.
But it's a very important part of who you are, how you think, how you approach the service to clients, and how you collaborate with estate planning attorneys or the M&A attorneys regarding how we're navigating the complexities of our client families' lives.
Yeah.
So you're going down, so thinking about medicine, we're in the financial services world, right? But you go through the path of law.
Right.
What did you enjoy? What did you learn most about the legal system, the practice of law?
Right.
What was formative during that time for you?
Oh, I just love that. I mean, learning how the legal system works or doesn't work. Interesting. I did a lot of that. Drove me to, there was so much academic learning that I started reading Charles Dickens, which he has some interesting satirical points about the law at the same time. But just learning how things operate and why. That world doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes unless you've gone pretty far down that rabbit hole. And so I really enjoyed that. But there was a possibility to powerfully then advocate for others, right? The more specialized skill, and when you get into an arena like that, you really can help others in an area that can be quite complex and confusing.
Right.
So there's some continuity there as to what landed me down this road, because I think we get that in finance too.
Right. And maybe we'll pick these pieces up as we go. So even, working now within wealth management, so far, what have you reflected back on during your time considering, medicine, working from science and your undergrad? What aspect of that was the biggest learning that you feel like you're already tapping into now in working with client families?
I think the diligence of investigating, right? Whether you're looking for a cure, whether you're looking for the reason why something happens, the reason why something is a good investment or it isn't, or why is this macroeconomic phenomenon happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
In science and in law, there's a technical aspect and there's a human element. And I enjoy both, right? I was not going to land in any kind of practice that had me sitting at a terminal or a desk all day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did not decide to go down that road, and had several opportunities to do so. But it was always important for me to be on the journey with other humans at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, that's so important, right? Because if it was just math, right, and just, finance or just the underlying investments, and it's going to be interesting to see how technologies evolve the industry, how artificial intelligence will play into that to add efficiencies.
Right.
But in the end, you're still dealing with people and people making decisions. And what is the right amount of inheritance?
Right.
How do you empower and not enable subsequent generations? You get into some of these topics, which the families that we're serving, those are the higher order conversations anyway. You have to do the investment management really well. You have to understand tax strategy and philanthropic strategies and financial planning. You have to do all the technical really well. But that aspect of drawing on the human experience is a really important part of the work that we do. Otherwise, you can't bring it all together.
Right. I mean, the technical aspect helps get others to their why, and it helps them form their why, execute the why, bring that to the families, those they employ. It really helps them when they get centered and they have a team and they have someone walking with them to guide them through technical components that they might not be familiar. I think that gives confidence to live into their purpose. Yeah. And so many of those, it's an academic, it's a execution, it's a practice, but then it's also empowering others.
Now, somewhere in this time frame, your father had passed away. Right. So can you reflect on that? Because now you have the human experience yourself of hard charging, going through, academic focus, really, pushing forward. And then you have your own life-changing human experience.
Right.
Can you reflect on that a bit?
I can. I'll try not to use too many hidden Kleenexes in here, but that was almost 18 years ago or more. But my father was a great influence in my life. And with many others as well. So that had a huge impact. It also hugely impacted my mom. And so I walked with her through her widowhood experience and just my family, and being the oldest and being that kind of nerdy person that I was. I think a lot of kind of the navigating through that process was spearheaded by me. And so it was an incredible time to watch someone. I mean, my mom is an absolutely brilliant woman. She's a Phi Beta Kappa out of Northwestern, but I watched her sign her name incorrectly at a bank. And I realized, all the capacity intellectually is there, but what an incredible impact grief has on decision-making. So this is the human element, right? Yeah. It's the behavioral science part of it. Yeah. And just also walking through that with someone so close, right? That it pushes all the buttons, but it also kind of enabled all the things that I feel like God put into me to bring out the compassion, the empowerment, right? The guiding, the counsel, the helps.
Right. And I think your mom was actually in the office earlier today, right?
She was.
And working through items with you now. But at that point in time, no one asked for this. You were all thrust into life scenarios, which happens in the life experience, unfortunately. And like you said, the grief that becomes overwhelming at that point in time. What did you learn from that time? How did you emerge from that? Where did you build additional convictions when it came to this subject then of bringing it back to, money and finances?
Right. Unfortunately, her first experience financially with that was someone trying to defraud her out of a life insurance settlement. And so one of my first interactions, and I was a newly minted lawyer at that point. So thank goodness for that. But think about where people don't have someone surrounding them they can rely on financially, legally. So that really gave opportunity, but I watched her walk through and then her start a ministry to walk through with others, people that can be very vulnerable, taken advantage of. They're almost, and not everybody, they deal with grief differently, but I watched it sideline some of her skills where she really needed support, and thought about and heard many stories after that about people that don't have the support systems there and what kind of havoc that wreaks.
And you and your mom also teamed up then. You've authored books. I mean, on the long list of credentials that we'll continue to work through the entire podcast, you've authored books together, right? Yeah. There's a series of books. Right. What prompted the actual putting it down on paper in terms of what you learned? And again, share the title of the book then too, and share a little bit more about it.
So maybe the background to back up that all along, Mark and I had done kind of budget counseling as a ministry just to help
Mark, your husband.
My husband, together done ministry helping folks get on a budget, do excellent stewardship. So that was almost like a ministry and hobby area of ours, enabling others before the financial credentials came and legal credentials. But by the time that happened with my mom, I was an attorney, and so already counseling others. And at that point, I had shifted to a different kind of work doing planned giving with the church. And so I had added the CFP credential. And that came out of a curiosity and a realization that I didn't have a finance background. But to speak into that role, I needed that credential. So at that point, with my mom paralleling, now she had this robust ministry to widows. She would pretty often be sticking her head over the backyard fence saying, "Hey, Val, I think this is fraud. I think, what about this? What about that?" And so we kind of developed it's kind of a sad thing, but frequently asked questions or frequent disasters that were happening. And we kept finding that some of these were the same questions over and over. And many of them were financial. Right on the heels of grief came all these issues financially. Here came the videos, and then we did a 1-minute feature on the radio, and then that got bigger. And then we were asked.
We'll come back to radio in a second, right?
Yeah.
So we'll stay in books and we'll come to radio, right? In the additional.
Right. So that turned into a publishing company asking us to write a book.
Okay. And the book is the title?
The book is Wise Women Managing Money.
And covering a wide array of topics. Yes. And so taking the wise women and the managing money piece. Right. How do you even come up with a title, right? And why the title and why the focus and a bit of the why of the book on that specific subject of linking wise women and managing money.
Right. So the title was actually kind of given to us. I would almost say pushed on, because I felt like, can we really say that sounds a bit, arrogant, the wise women managing money? And the publisher said, that's what it needs to be. You've developed wisdom academically, life skills, why, experience, why. So actually that was given to us. Yeah. And at first I wasn't very crazy about it, but it is a good title. And what we found in that process was a lot of chaos financially and a lot of lack of confidence. So when you get people that are quite vulnerable, their confidence takes even a further hit. And so we decided it just doesn't need to be that way. And some of these frequent disasters or frequently asked questions, this could be better. So we're going to write into that, because we've answered this a number of times, and we think there's a greater audience out there that wants to know some of these same things.
Yeah. In generationally, we end up in this, what they call the sandwich years, right? Where you're launching your children, your adult children, working with aging parents in the in-between. As you step back and look across the generations, and you look across the generations of wise women, and we'll focus a little bit on the subject of women managing money, the name of your book. What do you see differently from, say, your mom's generation to our generation to our children's generation and then the young kids when it comes to this subject, especially when it comes to women?
Right. Well, just a different standpoint. I think expectation, messaging from culture, messaging from family, faith, culture, all kinds of different things to women in the past. I mean, they were advertised to differently, different expectations. They didn't have STEM, much less STEM for girls back then, right? So my mom was in a generation where I think women weren't as as much. I mean, there were women accountants, there have been women lawyers and everything, but it just wasn't as expected of them. They weren't so much expected to be aggressive investors, to be deal makers, right? To hold more than 50% of the wealth. So you get stats that come out now. There's a big shift, I think. I mean, my mom and many of her friends have expressed, I can't believe that statistic. There's almost a disbelief of, can it really be that way? But you see generations of my age and younger, so I'm Gen X, and then on down, where these things have been different. It's come along, just in a different way, from society, from school, from academia, from business.
Right. There's a friend, I don't know if you've had the chance to meet Amy Hart Klein over at Pitcairn Family Office. And her and Dennis Jaffe wrote a book of finding her voice, creating her legacy.
Yeah.
And again, focused on, women, but a little bit of the finding her voice, which would then imply that the voice is lost or it wasn't there to begin. How does that strike you, and does that resonate in how you think about this subject matter?
Definitely. And if you look at the stats, right, the stats about how wealth will be held in the future, but you look at the stats of what is the percentage of women that feel confident about handling wealth, stewarding wealth, and navigating, transferring wealth down. The stats are kind of abysmal. And as you get into older generations, the stats are worse as to how women feel comfortable managing and stewarding money and handling large amounts of wealth. But they will. And so to me, that strikes a problem area that it needs help, and it needs help soon.
Yeah. And I always get cautious or concerned, right, with any stereotype, right? That's like, because we have some families that we serve where the woman in the family leads the entire conversation, right? I mean, it's like, so taking nothing away from those individuals that lead, but that's why I asked a little bit about across the generations, because I do think, quote unquote, traditionally, the man may have taken the lead in that relationship. And I do think it's changing in a lot of ways. It's changing with families that we serve, where the women are leading in different ways. What are some of the other stereotypes that you're concerned about when it comes to this subject of women and wealth?
Well, there's stereotypes, and then there's what I was referencing as stats. I have plenty of friends that are women on board members, and women that have been partners in firms and do tax, and they do law, and they do corporate governance and all kinds. However, just looking at the stats, that was less the norm before. Now it's growing. So I do get concerned about the stereotypes, but I just get concerned about if there's no confidence, then we're not deal making. And how does our economy work then, right? If more wealth is coming into the hands of people that are not confident, how does that work? How does innovation work? How does growth of business? How does family legacy? How does boldness to give and to help others happen when you're fearful or not confident? So that concerns me quite a bit. And to me, that's very motivating. I'm passionate about, let's move that needle. Let's make that different. Let's not wait for that disaster to happen.
Right. And so then my mind goes to the industry. Because if we go to the industry and talk about the differences across the generations, our industry, the financial services broadly, wealth management broadly, arguably is very white male dominated and older as well. Some of the younger team members in the office remind me there's more people over the age of whatever it is, 65 than there are under 35. So there's a generational component that comes into play. But there's also the gender difference in terms of male dominated versus women in the industry. So where do you think the industry is actually fallen short in the service to women? And I'm not talking about just widows, right? But I'm talking about women in couples, as daughters, as mothers, as spouses. I mean, where does the industry have gaps that you see as an opportunity then to be served better than historically?
I don't know if it's a chicken egg thing, but I do think we try to skate to where the puck is going, right? Some great hockey player said that, maybe even from Chicago. So
I think it's Wayne Gretzky, actually.
Right, but there you go. But we will take credit for it here anyway, right? So I don't know that the industry has done that. I'm not sure. And we're talking with advisors all the time. When my mom and I go to speak to groups, when I go speaking to groups or on the radio, I'm advising people speak to both spouses. The stats are that quite frankly, in a spousal relationship, 80% of the time, she is going to run the baton home, right? That's just a statistic.
Meaning that the male predeceases, right? And
I'm being polite.
Yeah.
But it's...
us guys go first. That's just the nature.
Right. And so is she confident to do that? All these great plans, that a couple has put together, is she confident enough to run that baton forward to the next generation? So the stats are saying no. And so I think our industry, it's, I know we can torture stats to confess to anything if we rework them long enough, but I think these are true, and I see it all the time, that they're not lying. And so our industry has a great opportunity to say, we want to include women in the conversation. We want to do things like not use jargon terms, which make them feel less than, which make them feel like I can't get it anyway. And I'm like, P.S., some of the guys feel that way too, right? Some of these terms are confusing and they put off. So folks are like, I don't get it. I just don't care. Well, I think they do care about next gen. They do care about their well-being. They do care about stewarding well. But there are just things that put off that I think we can do better.
Yeah. And I want to go deeper into we, now and how and what we're serving. I want to talk about your journey, but the aspect of, you and your mom with the books. You mentioned radio programs. So I don't want to lose that in the sequencing here. What's the radio program about? What is that?
Right.
What are you trying to convey through radio?
So we had a 1-minute feature. My mom started with one called New Beginnings, based on, again, these frequently asked questions that she was running into in her ministry. Well, we started to have many frequently asked questions about the financial that come after that. So you get people who are all of a sudden, I never knew we were $80,000 in debt, or wow, I'm now a half owner of a valve company that I've never been involved in, right? So there's multiple different kinds of issues, and we were frequently addressing that. So we added a 1-minute feature. At the beginning, it was called Starting Over Financially, because it was not just widowhood, but lots of changes in life. Or maybe someone who's starting from scratch saying, my legacy family never talked about money. They never talked about stewardship. So I'm literally not even starting over. I'm just starting. And that became Wise Women Managing Money to match the book.
Okay. And now that's on how many radio
Over
stations?
1,500 radio stations.
Yeah. So it's still out there, still
it is
being communicated,
Yes.
still hopefully helping and encouraging a lot of individuals as they try to navigate. When you were still in law, when your dad passed, you said, newly minted attorney. You ended up moving from law, though, to the philanthropic world.
Right.
So now let's spend a little bit of time then. What is the philanthropic world, right? What did that mean for Valerie Hogan?
So I had a dear mentor come to me during this time, so newly minted attorney, and I thought, well, I'm probably going to head for the West Coast and become an intellectual property attorney. And so being a person of faith, it was almost like God said, oh, that's really cute. Anyway, I'm going to have you over here. And so with our church, they wanted to start a planned giving division. And this is kind of a rare thing for a church. Hospitals and universities do this more, right? We're talking with folks about making gifts after they pass, or making gifts that are not cash. So this practice is pretty common in a lot of the philanthropic world, but it wasn't as common in church. So the cool thing is they kind of let me build that from scratch. And so it was a great opportunity, an entrepreneurial legacy, if you will, to start this. And so I had approached it like an investigative reporter. What are the best practices? I'm small and have a very little budget. So I'm going to have to jump on this lever as hard as I can to fling this forward, because it really matters. I want to see, this is a place I care so much about. I want to see it flourish for a long time. So in that, I realized I have the law piece. So as far as estate and coaching people on how to do that gifting, I felt pretty confident what I could add or the resources they could tap. But with no finance undergrad, I thought it's time for the CFP. I need to go get this knowledge. So funny enough, an attorney can challenge out of that. But I needed the class. I needed the content because I didn't take tax and finance in law school as my electives, I took intellectual property.
Okay.
So got that and then helped to build that. And so I was doing that for 9 years.
Okay.
And that led to a connection with National Christian Foundation,
Okay.
who does the same, teaching folks to do non-cash gifts, legacy gifting, donor advised funds, complex gifts. And so just kept going into that world and dearly love that because you're helping generous people be more generous.
Yeah. And so the link, and I want to go through a little bit of like, okay, what is National Christian Foundation, but what is a donor advised fund platform?
Right.
I used to chair the advisory board here in Chicago for the NCF office. NCF's continued to grow after we restructured some things, and Joe Pringle coming on, who's a prior individual on this podcast. Fantastic individual, love Joe. Took over the lead of the organization, and he tapped in and brought you on the team in terms of continuing to grow to serve people. NCF size and scope now, why they bring in a couple $1 billion with a B a year in financial gifts, and a large amount of that is not just appreciated securities, but it's illiquid assets, complex gifts. And so you were part of the team here in the greater Chicago area to work on that with individuals. But you were also a bit of a national resource. You spoke once or twice this year, I think, on a webinar and then in person at their national conference where you were speaking. Help people understand the organization a little bit more broadly, but also a little bit of your day-to-day and how you operated on behalf of the organization, which is a financial service provider, very highly technically competent service provider in the space.
Well, one thing is I love that organization because you could not turn the corner virtually or turn the corner in an office in Atlanta or Chicago without running into extraordinary people. There were people who had retired out of the general counsel's office of the IRS, or people who had their own law firm in estate planning. So I loved the highly technical component of excellence. At the same time, ministry focused to say, we're doing this for a purpose. We're doing this to help others. We're doing this to be greatly efficient and excellent stewards. And so if I could describe, without speaking on their behalf, but what they do, kind of breaking it down in two pieces, it's the donor advised fund, which is almost like a charitable checking account, as you know. So that's a great, efficient way to give, but also they would help people give assets like pieces of their business, like shares of their business, real estate, oil rights, intellectual property rights, which is really funny because as the faith piece, I was like, God's going to use that too. That's pretty cool. And so because I wondered, what am I ever going to do with this registered patent attorney piece? Well, that came back around full circle. So then we were working with families there where they were managing quite a bit. When you've got land or pieces or shares of multiple companies to give, and we worked with people that were giving from hedge funds and were giving from private equity, and so more and more complex spaces, or families that had ranches and oil rights, all kinds of things. For the person who's intellectually curious, it was just wonderful in a lot of aspects because you can help families kind of navigate through the technical to get to their goal of being generous.
Yeah. And as you know, we worked with families in the chair that we sit in regarding business interest gifts, these illiquid assets that can get moved in for tax reasons and better tax treatment that comes through the donor advised fund than maybe the family's private foundation or otherwise. As I remind everyone and our listeners, this is not on tax advice and legal advice, but it really gets to the point that it's a team sport in terms of how we need to collaborate with so many professionals, where a lot of our families look at us as the chief financial officer back to the family. They're the CEOs, or co-CEOs in coming together. As the CFO, then, how do you organize these resources? And NCF's been a great partner to Clearwater Capital to fulfill the gifting strategies for the families in a tax efficient way. As we speak often, and it either goes to taxes, family, or charitable intent, whatever that may mean on the charitable side, but it's purposeful, it's intentional, it's from the heart, from our client families, and doing things that the family wants to do and reducing taxes along the way, you know what, if there's only 3 buckets it can go to,
right.
And I still haven't gotten an email with anyone coming up with a 4th bucket, right?
Right.
But it's those 3 buckets. If we can redirect those resources,
Right.
then let's go ahead and do that. So you and I have known each other for going on a decade, from
Right.
just our paths crossing in different ways, mutual friends, mutual circles that we cross in. I'm with Clearwater Capital, and you were with NCF at this
Right.
point in time. But then you started to feel a shift.
Right.
So take us back to what is that? What was that shift? Prompting thoughts, motivations, ambitions. I mean, what
Right.
started churning in you that started the conversation for us to be here today?
Right. So many things, right? And so with faith as just part of who I am, right? It's not a brushstroke for me, it's the canvas. But I did feel kind of a shift and a leading into several different things at the same time, which one of them was I keep wanting to learn. So 2 years ago almost, I took a program at Columbia University on venture capital private equity, learning all about leveraged buyouts and all kinds of just to really be better at helping people navigate the beginning of organizations, their exit of organizations. So wanting to keep adding on to the technical. So that was going on. At the same time, I was meeting with folks where they were having exits, and I'll just put it that way, because they were either selling a business, they were restructuring, or they were literally someone had exited. So that was the only way I can describe that. It's a widow in a new situation, and she may now be navigating all new landscape, multiple trusts, so that complexity there. But I started to, and this is probably design on purpose, not by me, but where I'm having these experiences that are speaking into this, I feel like it's unsettling. And I want to qualify with that with I dearly loved what I was doing and the people that I was doing that with. I mean, I love my church. I'm still there, right? I still attend there. I'm still involved in that board. I dearly love NCF. I still, just spent time doing 3 different things. But I think if God is going to move us, he's going to move us, right? And so I started working with individuals where they were having kind of a rough experience through the exit of their company at the gift. So I was working with them almost kind of on the, not tail end of their journey, but where they were ready to make a gift, but looking back at that, it had been pretty rough. Or they were coming to me saying, asking questions where I was saying, well, okay, I think you should go to your advisor and ask about this. I think you should go to your attorney. And starting to realize if I could maybe help people earlier in the process, right? I mean, sometimes we learn about the right or the wrong that we were built to make right, or to be a part of that. And so I realized, boy, if these folks had somebody walking along the journey with them that could help that, because in addition to all the technical greatness that we can do, really walking with the human through the process, being their guide, being their counsel, being their friend through the process, I think matters too. That's the differentiator, right? It's even differentiator from AI. That'll give us information more quickly. We can get all these technical aspects, but the wisdom, the friendship, the care for the human, being interested in who they're becoming in the process, I think, to me, I was really just starting to move in that direction to think, where can I be earlier in this process? And that's when we started our first conversation.
So you take your definition of legacy, right? Having this impact and the day-to-day, the moment-by-moment impact of others around you. Then the human experience, and what does that mean from medicine, the technical aspect of what does that mean from law, the lived experience of what does it mean when life is thrust upon you, and the sudden passing of a loved one, and grief, and how you interpret that, the ability to give back beyond your family, to change the world and shape the world the way you want it through charity versus through taxes and government spending. All those sort of things now start conspiring together, right? To be stirring in you, to say, well, if I can have a greater impact, and if I change the word a little bit, if you can have a greater legacy impact, in moving, you need to move a bit more upstream, in the way. So when we started the conversation, roughly a year before you joined, you came not in checking out Clearwater Capital. and not as, but just as a friend, because
Right.
we've known each other so long, about what's the day in the life of. So as you started processing that, what started becoming kind of your decision criteria? How is that building? Because early on, it was really just exploratory.
Right.
What would that actually even look like?
I looked at where I could have impact. I looked through the experiences of the individuals that I was talking with at the time to look at where could I have greater impact. And so learning that they really are impacted by their advisors along the way to these decision points, to exit, to even in a family office environment where when do they include family in the conversation? And so realizing that I had really never intended to move into the wealth management space, but realizing that's probably where I needed to be with individuals when they were making some of these, and to start these big decision points earlier in the process, so they're not feeling like they're jammed in the chute with all these decisions. Like, this could be more life-giving if we started it earlier on.
Right.
And coming out of the gifting world that I knew all that went into that, and knowing you've got to start that way earlier.
Yeah.
Or even in someone's becoming a widow, starting that learning process for them about what they're holding on to can happen way earlier.
Right.
So I think that was the commonality. Then I started looking around, and at NCF, I had worked with probably over 100 different advisors just in my area. And then even being connected with some nationwide.
Right.
So to start to look around and say, well, what are they doing? What is a day in the life like? Can I really have the impact that I think I can have? Can I have the conversations that I'm wishing to have earlier on? Does that really happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's just, you called, said, come on, come on over when you're around. We can have a cup of coffee, and I can share a bit of what the life in the life, what a day in the life of John is like.
Right.
Scary place at times, right? A little bit going on, and yet you continue to come back and ask more questions and ask more questions. So you talk about how to do due diligence, right? To really go through this, and you had 100 plus different advisory firms that you had direct work with NCF, and yet you kept coming back and exploring and rank ordering those 100, because I mean, you're extremely intelligent, creative, kind, nice. I mean, all the adjectives apply to you, Val, right?
Thanks.
That you line up.
I'll take it.
And when you line up all the other organizations that are out there as you're going through this process, it's when it struck me at a certain point in time going, well, wait a second, Val, if you're thinking about actually making a move into this space, which wasn't the start of our conversation, when you're actually making a decision to move, I'm like, I wouldn't want you going anywhere else. But that, selfish of me, right? Because I would love for you, and I'm still considered a coup in the world that, you came in working with us.
Right.
But how are you stacking up your decision criteria through this mutual discernment process to ultimately put Clearwater Capital at the top of your list?
Well, so I had been coming and checking out the symposiums for a long time. I know you had invited me, and that was back when I was just with the church.
Those are our annual ongoing education, wide range of topics that get covered during those periods. Right.
And I also, as an intellectually curious person, I liked to come and hear about the markets and what's going on and what's coming in this financial world, because it had to bear on what I was trying to help people do. So that was important for me to hear, but I got to observe the firm kind of do its thing in that venue. And so knowing you, knowing the kind of complexity of the gifts that you were helping folks process, I just knew it's probably going to be best use of my time, talent, resource to be working on things that are quite complex, given, the nerdy amount of time that I've spent in classes in undergrad and grad and postgrad and all that. So I looked at that, and I looked at the complexity, the families, but also just, it was very important to me that a firm conduct itself with excellence. So I was looking for world class, always striving for that, right? So we want to get there, or we want to get as close to that, find out what's best in class. And so I did feel that from Clearwater. I also had a sense of, I can be who I really am. I can be a person of faith. I can be a person who I want to engage in not just the technical, not just the academic. I want to do that really well, world class if we can. Like, let's strive for that. But I also want the human element of it, the
Right.
caring element, the compassion, and that I knew, and we talked about this many times to get real, right?
Yeah.
Is that I would be able to have the support, the patience to craft the practice that I really wanted to have the time and care for people that they deserve, right? The patience to build into that. And it wasn't like, hurry up, we've got to do this. We've got to, it was just a structure that I think was built around clients and around the people, but bringing that world-class technical with it. So that's what I was looking for. And I wanted to have a good time. So,
gosh, there's multiple
Right.
channels I want to go down here. As you're getting closer and closer, we joked, right? Because we do know a lot of people in common and have a lot of friends in common.
Right.
And at a certain point in time, I'm like, okay, Val, if you've made this decision, right? We got to start letting people know.
Right.
Because, I wasn't poaching you, right? You came and saying, what's the day in the life of?
Is that for the record here?
That's absolutely for the record and recorded at this point. Because it's true,
right?
Your pursuit of how you approach what it is that you do,
right?
And we do. I mean, having authentic selves of who we are. That's why I was a client of John Chapman's, and my family is being served by him, given what I knew from running a $40 billion syndicated loan operation for GE at that point in time. Right? Became a client of John's. If something happened to me, how does my family get cared for? So we want to do this for our families as much as the families that we're serving, right? I mean, hence the term multifamily office and how we're thinking about complexity for ourselves and the families we're turning around serving, but doing it in a way where we can be ourselves, that we're enjoying this, that we're enjoying the ride and we're rolling up our sleeves for the families that we engage. You've heard us talk about character and competency, right? And both of those have to be at an extremely high level.
Right.
And it's an area, very broadly sometimes, where there's a lot of good people out there, right? And we talk about it within the faith communities, right? You end up with a lot of people that want to leverage that aspect of who they are.
Right.
But competencies, right, in the heavy lifting and the technical aspects don't have what you have to bring and what we, aspire and continue to develop the team to bring to the families that we're serving because we think that they deserve that.
Right.
And bringing those two items together. So how did that weigh into a reflect in maybe your final short list as you were making the decision of how that comes together in this character competency?
Yeah. I mean, each one is essential if you think about one without the other. So you've got character, but if you don't have confidence, you're not serving people well. You're still kind of failing them, right? You're not moving them forward. So it's good intentions. That's the label I would put on that. So, which is good. We like good intentions, but we like the technical capacity to carry that out.
To execute,
On the flip side, the other is what everyone would not like about this industry, right? It would be the technical competency without the character. And how many different, quote unquote, Wall Street movies can there be out there about that and what a disaster that is? So for me, that was the thing that absolutely had to be there. It's what I wanted. I was at a stage of life where I could choose and I could have time to really do the due diligence that it took to be with people that I wanted to be with. And I loved the organizations that I was with. I would bring all those people with if I can. But don't worry, organizations, I'm not going to go poach everybody, but I dearly love those folks. And so not to say that, but just in a place where I was feeling led, this was probably the place I could do it. And the great thing is that post-landing, I am having the conversations that I really wanted to have.
Okay, so let's go there, right?
Yeah.
So it's one thing to do due diligence, right? And we can talk about it from an investment viewpoint. You always have, here's the thesis, here's the beliefs, here's the interviews, here's the data that comes with it. And then you get to closing, and then you get on the other side of that, and you're like, all right, integration is always the hardest part of any acquisition, right? You got to go, the acquisition process could be hard, whether you're on the buy or the sell side. But the integration, though, is a challenge. It's true in your own decision, right? You now take a significant career change, right? And shift. You come into Clearwater Capital, and on day one, right, in terms of the onboarding, there's always bumps, right, in terms of those early days. But now, when you look at what you're doing.
Right.
Did the investment thesis hold up? Did your due diligence pay off? How are you feeling about that?
Right.
Not that we're
Well,
having
John.
yeah, exactly. Not that we're having a personnel discussion,
Right.
but just thinking about that, because I'm thrilled on behalf of the firm and our firm's leadership. I'm thrilled that you're feeling that way. But if you don't mind, share
Sure.
a bit more of like what that experience is like.
Well, two things I was looking for: growth and development. Technically, I mean, you don't know what you don't know. I sort of knew what I didn't know, but I got inside and went, wow. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for technical growth. I know a thing or two through, all the schooling and practice, but boy, there's loads more, and there's access to people that know a lot of that already, right? So I can be mentored, I can learn and grow there, and love that piece. But what was really important to me is, am I going to get to have these same conversations? Because I had been having conversations where, and it's a huge amount of trust and honor, where someone sits across from you and says, Val, what do I give the kids? How do I navigate the thinking on what they can handle, what this charity can handle, what my church can handle, right? I mean, that is a loaded question.
Right.
And it's a huge weight, honor, and responsibility to not necessarily say the answer, but to go through and help someone walk through their discernment process. And I was just so much hoping those would be the conversations. And like you said, day one, I mean, just meeting an amazing families joining up to work with me, to work with you, to work with us together in our area, and the firm that I'm meeting, just having those conversations that I was hoping to have, and at the stage that I was hoping to have them, which is when we're not in crisis, when we're able to really craft and move that along so that it's a life-giving process, not always easy, right? But to just have a better process. So, I mean, I'm hugely thankful, grateful, relieved that my thesis seems to have worked out, right? I mean, 90 plus days in, 6 months in, a little further in now.
I was going to say, closer to 6 months now, right? In terms of coming over. And some of those conversations I reflect back on, right? A family with significant amount of complexity, wealth, a lot of moving pieces. And even when they came to us, greatly successful in terms of what they've accomplished and how they put things together. But even when they got introduced to us earlier this year, they came in and said, wow, we thought we were studying Mars, but we realized we're studying Jupiter, meaning the size of the considerations, the thoughtfulness, the approach, how they were, it was much bigger, right? To stretch their thoughts versus it being tactics and tools. And we can get to the solutions. But first, you have to explore a whole lot of other subjects. Right. So when somebody's going through a liquidity event, it's like, don't wait till after the event to engage. Right. Do it years before you're in crisis, before your head's down going through the event itself. Let's engage in dialogue. Yeah. Recent, client meetings, right? And we're going through, and there's 7-figure charitable gifts, and the family's got confidence in terms of how the remaining assets will continue to sustain them for their lifetime. And we're taking all kinds of taxes out in legal ways, appropriate ways, in the way that's structuring, moving up that philanthropic gifting and planning strategy, so that when they go back to their charitable arm, that conversation's already happened. Right. So the fact that you've moved up in terms of that role to have even a greater impact is significant. Anything that stands out in your mind that you're like, here's almost a case study of like what you feel so good about, or where you found yourself in the moment. Right. Of yes, we're highly regulated, right? A lot of compliance work, a lot of notes in the non-glamorous aspects of the work that we do. But are there things that step out in those moments with maybe families that we're serving that you're like, I'm in the right place?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of just a couple. One is this couple that did make that major gift. I mean, they made decisions. They had time to look at it, think about it. I mean, they're a couple of faith, so they had time to pray about it and just strategize. look at the different options. They've made their decision, and we're at the beginning of November, so it's not a scramble.
Right.
This is well thought out, and they can breathe. They can have great holidays, and so that to me is kind of a shining moment where they feel confident, and they said, "Wow, we never really thought about these aspects. We're thinking about tax. We're thinking about estate. We're thinking about investment thesis. We're all the things, right? Even risk." And so we're talking about multifaceted things that they hadn't really been talked to, or maybe just not by just their advisor before. It was coming from multiple areas.
Right.
So we're kind of doing this CFO, coach versus owner type sports analogy. You and I always have some good and bad ones, right? But just to step into that role and to have a point of contact where we might not know all the things, but we also know who to bring in to serve them. So that was huge. And then a couple great conversations that I've had with Gen 2 women where they're stepping into some leadership roles with a multifamily family office situation where they may be Gen 2 or Gen 3. They're stepping into a little bit of leadership where I'm able to mentor, where I'm able to say, yeah, you can be confident, right? Back to that confidence building where you can do this. You can lead. You can help with deal making. You can help with due diligence, grant making. Right. So I've loved those conversations because what I love to see is someone leave the office with a little bit of pep in their step. They're feeling pretty good about it. And we're not in a rush. It's not a crisis. So this is something they can go and think about and come back.
Right. The pleasant surprises, right? So your investment thesis is playing out better than you had even anticipated. Right. But the additional resources, right? And I kind of reflect on Family Wealth Alliance. You were out in Boston for a gathering of the Family Wealth Alliance out there, the resources we can tap into and how we explore. What are some of the pleasant surprises that you've also discovered being like, wow, this is has the potential to be more impactful than you're anticipating?
So many things. From internally on the team that we have to put out media, the team that we have to put out content, letter writing, right? Multiple eyes looking at things so that they can be best in class. Our financial planning and modeling with a CPA on board for that. Just to say, if we're modeling for tax, He's also happens to be a CPA.
And ran a $500 million family office himself before coming over to partner with, or work with us and partner with us to grow this firm.
Yeah, that's so impressive. And then the investment team. So we come through CFP and we know a thing or two, and we're looking at investments. And yes, when I can't sleep at night, I do look at market futures. That's pretty nerdy, but I can't touch what the investment team is doing, where they're looking at it all day, every day. And that's their specialty, right? Or even the partners we're able to reach out to, like with corporate trustees, we're able to reach through Family Wealth Alliance, other connections to say, not only do we want to do best in class, but we're not going to do that internally, we're going to find out who does. And we're going to get that connected so that our families can have that best in class all around. And we're going to help vet, because, the family is busy building. The family is busy in doing what they do best. So we can do what we do best, and find other individuals to align with and to strategize with to bring that to bear, to help the family to get to where they're trying to go.
And whatever that may mean to that particular family. As we were speaking at one point, you were talking about the private equity venture capital program that you did out at Columbia. And somebody had made the comment to you that just struck me as kind of odd when you shared it, which was, well, why are you spending time on that? It's not related to what you're doing. Are you trying to be something you're not? Which I just don't get it, right? Why somebody without criticizing maybe because I don't know the individual that said that, but it's just so far off base because we have people that are creating their businesses, raising capital, selling their companies, bringing in partners, right? In the private market space, private direct investment is a big part of our client families. So that struck me as a bit strange.
It did me too.
Right? And so now, but as you're working on now and with these families, how are you even viewing tapping into this competency development, in the academic rigor that we bring to what we do? How are you looking at some of those items going, no, here, I keep leveraging these different areas?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't looking to go into those areas. I'm not looking to start a hedge fund. I'm not looking for, to move into the mergers and acquisition space. However, those programs struck me from a couple standpoints. People I was working with at the time were starting companies, some serial entrepreneurs. So they were starting companies, they were exiting companies, they were building another one, sometimes multiple at the same time. So I was curious about the venture capital part because this is where companies are formed, early stage. And so the things they would have to do to be generous on the exit or to get to their goals on the exit, I thought, can we back this up earlier in the pipeline? So I wanted to learn more about that. Also, just excellence in the exit, which has led me to the program I'm going to be taking in March, which is through Exit Planning Institute, just to help with that. Also, on the side of, I was on these early stage and exits, there was a widow who was being offered. So she was now literally half owner, not of a valve company, but of a company. And she was getting offerings to buy her portion out. And I thought, now, I'm not going to be the person who does the market analysis on this, right? I'm not going to be the valuation, but I want to know more about valuation. How do I point her to who's excellent in that space, right? So,
and interpret the information and be sitting with her and being like, that's a great offer, and here's what makes sense because of it.
I don't know if your brother's uncle has the best offer for you, but there's probably a little bit more bones and structure we can put around the diligence process than just who's randomly coming to the table. So that sparked a curiosity, which often ends in me taking some kind of class, program, or degree. So,
in September, we had, 2 different client families have liquidity events. One of them where I chaired the board for the family. So going from selecting the investment bankers and the deal attorneys and the navigation of the entire process to have a successful outcome for the families. So it absolutely does dovetail and brings that complexity together in terms of how we're approaching it. So that's the competency aspect. And then the character side, and the team and the people that we're working with and how we look at the team and team members. We're continuing to grow. We're continuing to hire. We're continuing to look. But we're also extremely patient with making sure that we bring in the right team members. There's an individual that we're extending an offer to, like right now, and we're hoping she accepts that offer. But we've kept that position open all year long because we were looking and waiting for the right person to come into play. And you, Val, have been that right person to come on to the Clearwater team. And again, just so thrilled. So as we turn the corner to close and wrap up, and there are so many topics and so many items we can continue to speak about, and we will back in the office. What are a couple of key things that you want listeners to know about Valerie Hogan, about Clearwater Capital, about the individuals out there that you don't want everybody to be clients, but for the individuals that you look at and say, here are those, I don't know what you call it, the relationships that you are seeking to serve and give your best to in this journey. Hit on a couple of those items for us.
Yeah, I think the individuals that are experiencing complexity, and maybe it's not in their main area that they're focused on. So it's in our area, right, where we're stewarding, where we're doing an exit in the financial area. They may be spending a whole lot of time in their business, growing their real estate business, their ranches, their payments business, whatever it would be, right? So they're growing the thing, but they need a team, and maybe where they're at now is not what they needed 20 years ago. It's not what they needed 10 years ago. So if families are finding themselves in this area of complexity, or they would really like guidance and wisdom on how do we get the family involved? What is Next Gen capable of? How do we come together around some of the things that are meaningful and purposeful to us? And maybe it's his, hers, theirs, and the family giving, right? Or just figuring out what that is. So I'd say that's probably a key group of individuals that we can really help, that I'd like to work with. Also, I mean, I just dearly love the generosity component. For families that are just saying, how do I maximize my impact for my family, for the benefit of others, for human flourishing in general? I mean, I dearly love that process. I would also say, just in general advice to anyone, know your plan. and have an advisor that cares about you and cares about you knowing your plan. And you don't have to know all of the intricacies. Maybe you don't care about knowing all the way down the rabbit hole of each intricacy, but you should have an advisor that speaks to your knowledge, to the way that you want to learn about that, to the level that you want to know. But know about that. I care about each of the clients that I'm working with having some level of confidence in their plan, a great level of confidence, knowing generally what it is at least, and knowing they can be confident how that's going to last. They're in the decision-making process, right? Because I don't want to get hit by a bus, but if I do, I want my clients to be great and keep going, keep getting to their goals and dreams.
Right. In the team effort, like you alluded to earlier too, and how we all serve these client families together.
Right.
Valerie, thank you so much for saying yes to joining Clearwater Capital. Thank you for saying yes to doing this episode for listeners and friends of Clearwater to get to know you a bit better. We're thrilled to have you as part of the team, and we look forward to leaving a legacy together for the families that we're serving, so that they can have the impact on the world that they're having.
Great.
So, listeners, thank you again for joining today. If you want to continue the conversation, please send an email to clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Have a blessed day.